folks. I want to talk to you today about your money, your tax dollars. Dollars that were taken from your paycheck before you ever saw them and handed over to a bunch of academics in Washington, D.C., who spent them telling your children that America is a crime scene. The Smithsonian Institution, America's museum, funded by you, the American taxpayer, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. And what have they been doing with it? What have these curators, these scholars, been producing for you, the people footing the bill? Well, my friends, we now know exactly who is running the exhibits at America's most famous museum system. Every single curator on a 7-person exhibit team, every one of them has built their entire academic career around themes of racial injustice and social justice. Not one of them, not two, all 7. 7 for 7. A perfect score. You couldn't get 7 people to agree on pizza toppings. But these people, unanimous, lockstep. The DEI Magnificent 7. And they are producing exhibits in your museum with your money that frame the American story as one long, unbroken catalog of oppression. Now, there is a fight brewing in Congress, a real one, and it is long overdue. I'm Rick LeBow, this is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. My friends, the Smithsonian Institution was founded in 1846 with a bequest from a British scientist named James Smithson, who left his entire estate to the United States to create an institution devoted to, and I love this, the increase and diffusion of knowledge. The increase and diffusion of knowledge. Now, I don't know what James Smithson would make of an exhibit that treats the entire sweep of American history as a structural racism delivery mechanism, but I suspect he would not be thrilled. Congress has been funding this institution at a level of roughly $1 billion a year. That is not a typo. $1 billion a year from you. From the people who drive to work, pay their mortgages, fill out their tax returns honestly, and generally go about their lives believing that their government is doing something sensible with the money. And what are they doing with it? Let me read you, from my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, what Fox News has uncovered. The curators responsible for a major Smithsonian exhibit, all of them, the whole team, have spent their careers in their academic work, weaving in themes of racial injustice and social justice. Now, I want to be precise here because this is important. This is not a coincidence. You do not accidentally assemble 7 people who all share an identical ideological worldview. That requires effort. That requires a hiring culture that has decided consciously that one kind of scholar is acceptable and another kind is not. That is a monoculture, folks, and we are paying for it. Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia has now proposed tying Smithsonian funding to requirements that the exhibits highlight American exceptionalism. And the left is losing its collective mind over this. You'd think somebody had proposed burning the building down. They are absolutely beside themselves. You can't politicize the museum, they say. You already did. You already politicized it. The question is simply which direction it's pointed. When you build an exhibit whose entire intellectual architecture is built around America as a fundamentally unjust, racist, oppressive society, that is a political statement, a very specific one. And you made it with money that came from people who disagree with you profoundly. Now, here is what the all-knowing, all-sensing, all-seeing Maha Rikki wants you to understand about how this works. This is not just the Smithsonian. This is the entire machine. You have universities that are ideological greenhouses, growing these scholars, certifying them, sending them out into institutions. You have museum boards that hire exclusively from that pool. You have grant committees, also staffed by the same people, that fund only work which confirms the same premises. And then, at the end of this beautiful circle, you have a museum exhibit that presents itself as neutral, objective history. It is not neutral. It has never been neutral. And the dirty little secret, which they are desperate for you not to think about, is that this is not education. Education presents competing ideas and lets the mind work. What the Smithsonian has been doing is closer to what I will charitably call civic programming. You go in, you walk through, and by the time you exit through the gift shop, you have been instructed, not educated, instructed in a very particular way of seeing your country, which you built, which your ancestors built, which, for all its flaws and imperfections, and no serious person denies there were flaws, produced the greatest expansion of human freedom and prosperity in the history of civilization. And they want to put that story in a museum and charge your grandchildren to see it framed as a horror show. I have to tell you something, folks, and I say this with all the humility I can muster, which is not much. I have been talking about the left's long march through the institutions for 30 years. 30 years. The universities, the media, the foundations, the museums, the HR departments, all of it. And people used to roll their eyes at me. Rick, you're being paranoid. Rick, you're seeing things. Well, I'm not saying I told you so. I'm saying it as loud as I possibly can while grinning. They took the long road. They did it slowly, methodically, one hiring decision at a time, one grant at a time, one curriculum revision at a time. And now you have a situation where the institution founded to increase and diffuse knowledge is instead increasing and diffusing a very specific grievance narrative, and they are daring you to complain about it. Because if you complain, you are, say it with me, a racist. You don't want to have an honest conversation about history. You want to whitewash it. You want to suppress the real story. No, I want the real story, all of it. I want the Lewis and Clark expedition. I want the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk. I want the Normandy landings. I want the moon landing. The actual moon landing, not the one they now want to revisit through the lens of who didn't get credit. I want the full, complicated, magnificent, sometimes painful, ultimately triumphant story of the American people, not a prosecution, not a trial, not an exhibit that exists to make visitors feel guilty about being American. And here is the thing about Congressman Clyde's proposal. The left will call it censorship. They will say the government is trying to dictate what museums can say. But I want you to think about this very carefully. The government is already dictating what museums say. It's called funding. When you give an institution $1 billion a year, you have bought yourself a seat at the table. That is how money works. The question is not whether the funder has influence. The question is whether the funder's influence is ever going to point in the direction of the people who wrote the checks. And right now, it doesn't. It points in one direction and one direction only, and that direction is not toward you, my friends. That direction is not toward the American who works for a living and loves his country and would like his kids to grow up proud of where they were born. Now, there are some conservatives who get uncomfortable with the idea of attaching strings to government funding. I get it. I understand the principle. But here is a different way of looking at it. The Smithsonian is not a private gallery. James Smithson's original gift was then taken up by the United States Congress, which voted to accept it and has voted every single year since to fund this institution with public money. That makes it a public institution. And a public institution has an obligation to the public. All of it, not just the half that votes Democrat. If the Smithsonian wants to be a purely ideological enterprise, it can go raise its own money. Go hit up the same foundations that fund every other left-wing project in America. George Soros has a checkbook. He writes checks for everything else. Let him fund the America as a crime scene exhibit, but do not take money from working Americans and use it to tell their children that everything their parents built is built on blood and sin. That is where I land on this. That is where I have always landed on this. And the beautiful thing is, and I think this is what has the left so rattled right now, more and more Americans are landing there too. All right, folks, let's run through a few more stories for you this fine Thursday, because there is no shortage of material, and the Maha Ricky has an obligation to keep you informed. First up, and this one is absolutely delicious, the DOJ has announced $3 billion in grants to help cities recover from the damage done by Joe Biden's immigration policies. And they have named these grants the Biden grants. B-I-D-E-N, Biden, as in, here is the bill for what Biden did. Here is the invoice. They have literally named the grants after the man whose policies created the damage. Now, I want you to think about the particular genius of that move, because it is not subtle, and it is not trying to be subtle. It is rubbing the Democrats' nose in their own record with the enthusiasm of someone who has been waiting a long time to do exactly that. Meanwhile, and this is the story running right alongside it, 21 state attorneys general have sued the federal government to keep food stamp benefits flowing to non-citizens and to stop Washington from checking whether the people collecting benefits are, and I want to make sure I have this right, alive, unique, or eligible. Those are the three criteria they are fighting to avoid verifying. They are going to federal court to argue that the government should not check whether a food stamp recipient is a living, non-duplicate human being who qualifies for the program. And they call U.S. the extreme ones, 21 attorneys general going to court to protect a program from the outrageous, unconscionable intrusion of finding out whether the recipients exist. You want to know why we're broke? This is why we're broke. And if you point that out, they will call you heartless. Dead men don't need groceries, folks. That is the whole ballgame right there. If you cannot agree on that, then we are truly beyond the reach of reason. Now, story number 2 in the roundup, Texas Children's Hospital. This one is not funny. This one is alarming, and it deserves your full attention. TCH has settled a case, and in that settlement, they have admitted to years of serious fraud. Specifically, in order to perform transgender procedures on children, the hospital and its providers fabricated diagnoses. They invented illnesses that the children did not have, pretended these kids were sick, and then billed insurance companies for treating the fake illnesses. That is what happened. That is what they admitted to. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because we spent several years being told that anyone who questioned the medicalization of gender-confused children was a hateful, bigoted monster who wanted children to suffer. We were told the science was settled. We were told the hospitals were acting with the highest ethical standards. We were told to trust the experts. They were billing for fake diseases. This is a major American children's hospital, and they were committing fraud in order to perform procedures on minors. I don't want to hear another word about trusting the institutions. I don't want to hear it. The people who questioned this loudest, the parents, the legislators, the talk radio hosts you were told were dangerous, they were right, and the institutional apparatus that called them dangerous was covering for fraud. Don't doubt me, folks. When your instinct tells you something is wrong, and the experts tell you your instinct is hateful, and then 3 years later a major hospital settles a fraud case, your instinct was right. Third and finally, Tucker Carlson and 2028. The Washington Examiner is reporting that chatter about Chatsworth Osborne Jr. running for president in 2028 will not go away. His allies are talking about a constituency. Tucker himself says he doesn't want to run. They all say that. Every single one of them says that at this stage. Oh no, not me. I'm a simple, humble cable host turned podcast guy. And then 2 years later, there's a campaign bus. Look, Tucker has an audience. He has a following. He has moved the needle on foreign policy and populism in a direction that makes establishment Republicans deeply uncomfortable, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a point in his favor. Whether he actually runs, I'll believe it when I see the filing. But the fact that it keeps coming up tells you something about the hunger that's out there. The people want someone who will say the things they are thinking out loud, without apologizing for it, without walking it back the next morning, without issuing a statement from a PR firm explaining what they really meant. There is a constituency for that. There has always been a constituency for that. I built a career on that constituency, and I'm still here. My friends, I have one final thought for you on this Thursday, and it is this. We live in a country where the government funds museums to tell your children their heritage is shameful, where attorneys general sue to stop the counting of dead food stamp recipients, where a children's hospital admits to fabricating diagnoses to perform procedures on minors, and where the political class looks at all of this and says the real problem is that people like me keep talking about it. The common thread is that the institutions we were taught to trust, the hospitals, the museums, the federal agencies, the universities, have, in too many cases, been captured by people who do not share your values, do not love your country the way you love it, and are very comfortable spending your money to tell you so. But here is the thing I want to leave you with, and this is important. The people are not fooled. They haven't been for a while now. The elections are showing it. The lawsuits are happening. The hearings are being held. The fraud is being exposed. It is slow. It is frustrating, but it is happening. America is not a crime scene. It is the greatest experiment in human self-governance ever attempted on this earth. And the people who built it, who maintain it, who get up every morning and make it work, they are not going anywhere. Neither am I. I'm Rick Liebow. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow, if they let us back on.